The Deal at the Crossroads, the Robert Johnson story. Have you ever heard the chilling story of Robert Leroy Johnson, the man who was once the worst guitarist in Mississippi, but returned from the darkness as one of the greatest musicians the world has ever known? Robert was born on May 8, 1911, in Hazelhurst, Mississippi. He dreamed of becoming a legendary bluesman, a master of the guitar. But no matter how hard he tried, his playing was dreadful. Locals would laugh. The old bluesmen would shake their heads in pity. Night after night, he dragged his battered guitar into the smoky juke joints and rundown bars, only to be met with mocking laughter and cruel jeers. The drunken crowd would shout him down, throwing bottles, booing, driving him off the stage. To them, Robert Johnson was nothing more than a joke, a hopeless failure with no future in music. Even the bar owners told him to put the guitar down and never play again. But Robert refused to give up. And then, one moonless night, Robert simply vanished. No one knew where he'd gone. Some folks whispered that he'd left town for good, maybe to start fresh in another city. Others claimed he'd found honest work on a farm far away. But no one really knew the truth. All they knew was that Robert Johnson was gone, without a word, without a trace. Robert simply vanished. They say late one moonless night, Robert Johnson found himself standing at a lonely crossroads, miles away from any town, deep in the heart of Mississippi. The wind was still. The air hung heavy and cold, thick with fog that curled around his boots like fingers from the grave. 4 dirt roads stretched out before him in the shape of a crooked X, lost in the darkness. The only sound was the creak of old trees and the distant howl of a lone wolf. Robert clutched his guitar tight against his chest, his heart pounding like a drum. He had come to this place for a reason. They whispered of this crossroads in hushed tones, a place where desperate men made desperate choices, where things, not of this world, would listen if you called. As the clock neared midnight, the air grew colder, the shadows deepened, and then a figure appeared, tall, dressed in black, a stranger with a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, hiding his face in shadow. His presence felt wrong, as if he had stepped out of a nightmare and into the world of men. The stranger said nothing. Instead, he reached for Robert's guitar, took it gently, and began to tune the strings, one by one. The air was like nothing Robert had ever heard, a dark, beautiful melody that seemed to twist the night itself. With a cold smile, the figure handed the guitar back. No words were spoken, but Robert knew. The deal was done. As the figure melted back into the fog and shadows, Robert stood alone at the crossroads, holding the guitar that would make him a legend, and curse him forever. When Robert Johnson finally returned to town, he was no longer the same man. The quiet, clumsy boy who could barely strum a tune was gone. In his place stood someone different, sharper, darker. His eyes, once wide and nervous, now held a strange, distant gleam, as if he'd seen things no man should ever see. He picked up his guitar and played, but this time, the sound was like magic. The notes flowed like water, smooth and hypnotic, haunting blues that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. His fingers danced along the strings with impossible speed and skill, coaxing melodies from the wood and wire that no one in Mississippi had ever heard before. The juke joints that once laughed him out the door fell silent when he played. Men stared, women gasped. Even the old bluesmen sat frozen, their drinks untouched. Whispers filled the smoky room. "He made a deal," they said. "He met something out there in the dark, and sold his soul for this." Some swore his eyes weren't the same anymore, too dark, too deep, like twin shadows that stared right through you. Some said the devil himself had left his mark on Robert Johnson. But the fear turned to fascination. People came from towns miles away just to hear him play. The dance floors filled. Men stomped. Women spun. Sweat dripped from the low wooden ceilings as the music wrapped around them. Wild, dark, beautiful. Robert smiled as he played. knowing every note pulled them deeper under his spell. They loved his music. They couldn't get enough. But deep down, they all wondered, what price had he paid to play this way, and when would the devil come to collect? His songs hinted at the truth. Crossroad blues, Me and the Devil blues, each note a warning of the terrible price he had paid. And then, at only 27 years old, Robert Johnson died. Poisoned, some say. Taken by the devil himself, others believe. His body was laid in an unmarked grave. But his legend? It still haunts the crossroads of Mississippi. Some say, if you stand at those crossroads at midnight, the devil might still be waiting, ready to strike a bargain. But beware, the devil always collects his due.